What's going on? This is your man John Fortune, your host of the Frustrated Fan Sports Show, and today I'm going to talk to you about something in my new segment called Outside the Echo Chamber. What I'm doing now is I'm going to talk about something that a lot of people have been talking about the tanking in the NBA. Tanking. We need to stop the tanking. Tanking needs to stop. Tanking. And I want to say this, and I want everybody to hear me as I say this. You can't successfully tank in a system that is already rigged. The draft system and the draft lottery has been rigged for years. And I've said this from an onset. Last year, I accurately predicted who was going to win the draft lottery. Not only that, you're talking about and I remember people were sitting up there saying, "Hey John, that this doesn't make any sense, because why would they let the Mavericks win it and not the 76ers?" And I had to explain that new ownership came into the Mavericks. That trumped anything the 76ers had. The 76ers won the draft lottery years ago when the Colognes came in. The draft lottery has to be rigged because teams that have for years not been super successful have all somehow, some way gotten less number one overall picks than teams that have had the least amount of opportunities and chances to get the number one overall pick. The NBA wants a superstar in every city. That's what they want. The problem is that every place can't have a superstar. I can tell you right now that there's a high chance that teams like the Milwaukee Bucks, the Minnesota Timberwolves, not the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Memphis Grizzlies, the Atlanta Hawks, these might be teams that might win the draft lottery next year. And that's because all these teams have lost stars. Trae Young is now no longer in Atlanta, even though I can't think of the boy's name right now, and I'm mad because I just saw him play. He's becoming their superstar, but he's not a top level guy yet. He doesn't truly replace Trae Young. Then you got a place like Milwaukee, where if Giannis gets traded, it's done there in Milwaukee. Like he was the reason players were coming to Milwaukee. I remember Milwaukee was never really a place that people wanted to play. Then you think about also another guy, and when you think about Ja Morant with the Grizzlies, they just traded away Jaren Jackson, and they're trying to trade Ja Morant. And y'all don't think that the turmoil that is happening with the Memphis Grizzlies right now wouldn't find a way that somehow, some way, it will be warranted for them to get the number one overall pick? And not because of tanking, but because the NBA wants a superstar there. Memphis wasn't expecting for Ja Morant to be the way that he is, or for him to make the mistakes that he's made. But again, tanking really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because the draft lottery is rigged. The San Antonio Spurs have somehow, some way managed to find a center all the time to be their centerpiece in San Antonio for years. David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and now Wemby. who, by the way, was talking about how he loved the Spurs so much. So they put him there. And these are the type of tactics that happen all the time. There has to be new ownership in the team. A major superstar leaves the team. Or somebody that is NBA royalty has to now come into the organization. That's the way it happens. That's the way it goes. Like I said, when people was talking about the 76ers last year, and they were like, well, John, I don't understand why the 76ers didn't get it. The 76ers, actually, the lottery was in favor for them, because you know why? Their pick was top 4 protected. So they got to draft in the top 5. Their pick was top 4 protected. So if they fail after that, then they would have lost their pick. So in actuality, it was rigged for them too. Even though they didn't get the first overall pick, they still got to keep their high pick because it was I think it was like top 4 protected. And remember, magically when the Wizards appeared and they had fallen, boom, 76ers ended up in the 4th spot. I think it was the 4th or 3rd spot, one of the two. And think about historically, teams that have been historically bad. The Washington Wizards / Bullets, in its history of drafting, has gotten the number 1 overall pick twice. Y'all heard me. The Washington Wizards / Bullets, in the history of their drafting, which goes back to the 70s, got the number 1 overall pick twice. Now y'all may say, well, John, what were the 2 times that they got it? Well, they got it when they selected Kwame Brown, which was when Michael Jordan came in and became like president / partial owner of the Wizards. They got the number 1 pick then. Then when Ted Leonsis became full owner of the Washington Wizards, they picked John Wall with the number 1 overall pick. So everybody's sitting here and concerned about tanking, when guess what? Tanking doesn't harm anything, because guess what? The draft lottery is rigged anyway. And then there's stupid arguments out there where people sit up there and they say, well, John, that's not true. That can't be true. I mean, if it was rigged, it's too many people that have to keep that secret to sit up there and do that. Do y'all not understand that there's a such thing as NDAs? And then it's all done by law firms. Law firms have client confidential contracts, which is another NDA. Then the NBA itself has an NDA. So what people are going to talk? What people are going to come out and talk? Nobody. Because you know why? They make way more money being quiet than they would saying anything. I've been in law firms a whole majority of my working career, of my corporate career. Everybody keeps their mouth shut. Everybody. Everybody signs some type of releases, some type of NDAs, some type of termination clauses, everything. People sign stuff all the time where they can't talk about nothing. That even includes people who've successfully sued law firms and sat up there and they still can't say nothing after successfully suing the law firm. So yeah, who's going to say anything when it's not it's not in your best interest to say anything. What reporter is going to call? What reporter they're going to talk to? Who they're going to break secrets to? Nobody. Because at the end of the day, they don't want that type of information out there. And they're not going to put that type of information out there. They're not going to sit up there and lose their credibility just for the sake of doing that. Because guess what? They understand that it's what needs to be done. It's just what needs to be done. And that's how they look at it. Like I said, I actually have a video on my channel where I go through the history of showing you how the draft has been rigged all the way up to when New Orleans picked. I've been able to accurately tell people who was going to succeed, who was going to get the draft lottery, who was going to get the #1 overall pick, and why. And so far, all three of my situations have come out correct. New ownership change, NBA legacy family, something. It has to be a player, a GM, where daddy and son is all that. And then it has to go to they lose their superstar and the team is in a city where they need the superstar to be there. I knew when they did the story about Victor Wembanyama coming out of France and how the Spurs was his favorite team. I said right then and there, San Antonio needs a star anyway. Yep, yeah, Victor's going to San Antonio and hit that right on the money. It never fails. It never fails. When LeBron James left Cleveland, guess what Cleveland got the following year? That's right, that #1 overall pick. And they got it another year behind that. Because the owner was so offended at the fact that they weren't going to be able to have a superstar there, so they needed the #1 overall picks. Then they lucked up again because one of the guys was a big time failure. So yeah, y'all have to understand, tanking doesn't matter. Not only that, what we also saw is that now with the finale of the NBA All-Star Weekend, we also saw something else that happened. Something that has been very destructive to the NBA. What we saw in the All-Star game, where we saw the USA Stars and Stripes teams put a whooping on the world team, what we saw was the return of the old NBA to some extent. We saw guys not relegated or not focused, or coaches not focused on analytics. We saw coaches go out there and let the players play and showcase their skill and their ability without analytics being pushed into their faces all the time. We've seen multiple former NBA players go on podcasts and talk about how general managers have told them that they're only playing 13 minutes a night. Jeff Teague tells an amazing story about how he sat up there and he went to, I think it was the Hawks or somebody, and one of the players was like, yeah, we're not playing because we only play 13 minutes. So then he said, oh, don't worry about it, you'll have that meeting too. And then he sat up there and he met with the general manager, and the general manager said, yeah, you got 19 minutes to play every game. And Jeff Teague was like, man, if I'm sitting up there and I'm hot and I've got 30 by the half, and he told Jeff Teague, if you get 30 in 19 minutes, you's a bad boy. But it didn't matter. It was all about analytics. That's the point. Analytics. How do you save the NBA? Analytics. It doesn't matter how it's used, how improperly it's used, how poorly it's used. Analytics. But it seems like analytics is only applied to certain players. Somehow, some way, analytics has found a way to somehow, some way avoid Jokic altogether. I never see Jokic out there jacking constant threes. Somehow, some way, they don't focus on analytics enough when it comes to Jokic. How about Luka? Nobody talks about analytics when it comes to Luka. Concanupo, Cooper Flag. We're not seeing analytics applied to them at all. Victor Wembanyama, we don't see analytics applied to him. But we're constantly seeing guys like Anthony Edwards shoot from three for no reason at all. Joel Embiid. And we're seeing guys constantly do this. Like if you watch an NBA game, we see guys jacking threes that aren't even three-point shooters. And they're shooting from long range and missing. Have zero accuracy. But as long as they're shooting threes, it doesn't matter. As long as they're shooting from deep, it doesn't matter. Being so desperate to want to evolve your game into the Euro style has done nothing but destroy the NBA and the game as it was. The Euros never asked for you to change your game. They never asked the NBA to sit up there and have analytics cost teams like this, or have players not be as special as they could be. The Euro players never asked for that. In fact, remember the 1992 Dream Team? We came to find out how great the NBA was and how much the NBA was already a global game. And guess what? Those guys were better than the guys that are playing now. They were more accurate when it came to shooting. They didn't care about jacking threes. They wanted to get buckets. These guys are not focused on getting buckets anymore. They're just focused on making sure they're staying within the analytics chart. Jeff Teague, again, going back to him, tells a story about how they told him he needed to shoot more threes. He wasn't shooting more threes, so they traded him away. Jeff Teague was an effective scorer. He really was. I now understand how a guy like Jamal Crawford is constantly on the bench and becomes the greatest sixth man ever, when this man should have been a starter a long time ago. The same thing applies to Lou Williams. Putting this much emphasis on analytics has destroyed your game so much that we can't even see the stars anymore. It's not the same game. And again, they always tell you representation doesn't matter until it matters. The NBA was going to be global even without the analytics. And analytics, there's nothing that is shown in the NBA that analytics actually works. Analytics works in baseball. Yes, it does. Because you can tell by guys' batting average and things like that. You don't go and tell an NBA player to jack a three and he's like a 16% completion percentage. He has a 16% completion percentage from three. You don't tell that guy to keep jacking threes. And that is also why the NFL has stolen your days. The NFL saw that the NBA was focused on stupidity and analytics. And the NFL said, let's try Christmas. Let's see what we can do. Let's see if we can snag Christmas. How about we snag more days on Thanksgiving? Yeah. In the past, the NFL would have never done that. The NFL was so fearful of going up against the NBA on the holiday games that they tried their best to avoid the NBA altogether. Now they could care less. They could care less. They've stolen Christmas away from the NBA and said, what you gonna do about it? Nothing. And that is what the problem is right now. The NBA needs to go back to the format that they had it, where analytics wasn't a thing that was so involved in their game that you've basically ruined it. You've basically ruined the game. And analytics, like I said, analytics has set up there and it looks like it's only applied to certain people. Gilbert Arenas tells a great story about how they came with him with analytics and he was like, what? This dude can't defend me. I can go out there and bust his butt for about 40. I'm about to show y'all. And he went completely against analytics and was a fantastic player. But now we're seeing guys, Anthony Edwards, who's a fantastic dunker, had the audacity to come out and say dunking was overrated. When he was right at the peak of him becoming the face of the NBA, he said dunking was overrated. And what did we see him do in the All-Star game? Not sit up there and shackled down by analytics. And he sat up there and went out there and destroyed. It's time to give up on analytics. I think what most people don't say this, they don't admit it, but I think analytics is actually what makes LeBron James not the GOAT. I think analytics has actually been the thing that has harmed LeBron James as a player. When we see physically, he is physically the strongest and probably the best player physically. But we've seen him jack threes for no reason at all. We've seen that. Analytics has hurt guys like Chris Paul and Andre Miller and Michael Carter Williams, even Ben Simmons. Analytics has done nothing but destroy the NBA. And until they're okay with going back to what the NBA really was, where guys were trying their best to posterize dudes, it's going to be a game that eventually the NFL is just going to keep trying to impede on their days. NBA, do better. Again, tanking doesn't matter when the system is already rigged, and analytics at the end of the day is killing the game. Y'all tell me what y'all think in the comments below. Am I off point with this? Am I actually on the right page with this? How many of y'all disagree? How many of y'all don't disagree? Tell me in the comments below. Other than that, this has been your man John Fortune, and it's been the Frustrated Fan Sports Show.